Hi and welcome to Module 3. In Module 2, the previous module, we talked about Ruby. And by now you guys should have enough knowledge to jump into Ruby on Rails. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing in this module. We'll start off a module by talking about the core principles of Ruby on Rails. We'll talk about model view controller. And actually, model view controller is not just a principle that applies to Ruby on Rails. It's a principle that applies to a lot of web frameworks as well. Then we'll talk about convention over configuration. And basically the idea there is that there are some good conventions that Rails pushes you to follow. And you could step outside of those conventions if you want, but it's a very good idea to follow conventions, and this way the applications are built faster. And that's what Rails is very famous for rapid prototyping, allowing you to build applications very fast. One of those conventions is using the same directory structure for your application. And this is actually great because you work on one Rails application, you know the directory structure, and then when you move on to the next project, you know exactly where things go, which is great. Then we're going to move on and find out how to generate a controller and a view in Rails and build some pages that are dynamic. And by the time we get to the end of a module, we'll be able to build a functional recipe finder application. Now, there's a little problem. To build a recipe finder application, you need to have data. You need to have recipes. And usually that data would be stored in a database. Now, we haven't talked about databases, and we're not going to in this course. The next course, we'll talk about databases. But we have to build the application in this course. So how are we going to do that? Well, as we're going to see, there is a way that Ruby lets you pull data from the internet, from a web service, and easily integrate that data into your Ruby on Rails application. And that is how we're going to build our web application. In the last module, we talked about unit testing with rspec. In this module, we'll talk about a different concept, which is similar, called black box testing. And the idea there is that you don't have to have a code that you're testing against. You're just testing against the black box. So this way, you could test against the code that's up there in the cloud if you want. And that's exactly what we're going to do, using rspec and using the capybara, which is a Ruby gem. So as I mentioned, we're going to build a functional recipe finder application by the end of this module, which is going to be sort of a project that's going to finish off a course. Now, but there's a philosophical dilemma that I have for you guys. If you build the application, but your friends, your coworkers, or your potential employers don't see it, did you really build a web application? Probably not. So to be able to broadcast it, we're going to deploy the application to a cloud service for everybody else to see. And with that, I will see you in Module 3.